Hi, everyone. My name is Valeria Rivera, and I'm a marketing specialist contractor here at Study in the USA. I'm originally from El Salvador, but I lived in Pennsylvania while attending Lyman College. And later, I moved to California, where I started working at Study in the USA. So I know what it's like to be an international student in the US. You might recognize me from previous sessions, both as a panelist and a moderator. More recently, I led an Instagram Live Q&A session with the members of the TOEFL team. That was a super fun, super informative session, and we'll put the links of my past sessions in the chat so you can check them out after this. Today, we're so happy that you can join us for the topic, Applying to US Schools, Navigating the Process. We have a great group of panelists, starting off with Cassidy Gardner, an international enrollment counselor for Central and Southern Africa and Ghana at the University of Arizona, Jill Barr, Associate Vice Provost, Graduate Education and Senior Assistant Dean, Graduate Enrollment at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And last but not least, we have Tina Rong, Director of International Admissions at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Before we get any further, we'd like to mention that Study in the USA will provide one special winner a $50 Visa gift card. To qualify, tag your friends in the class and classmates in the comment section below, and Study in the USA will announce the winner shortly after the session. We'll take just a few moments before we begin so that more people can join us, but while we wait, we'd love to know in the comments, where are you watching this from? You know that we always like to know where people are from. And what is your inspiration for why you would like to study abroad? So please engage in the chat. We always like to hear from you guys. For those of you who are just joining us, I will reintroduce myself. I'm Valeria, and I'm a marketing specialist contractor at Study in the USA. I'll be moderating today's session. And as you might know, today's session features the latest episode of our popular series, My Dream, My Destination, alongside our partner, TOEFL. You can check out our previous episodes by visiting Study USA or TOEFL on Facebook. Now, I will let each of our amazing panelists tell us a little bit more about themselves before we dive in. Hi, Cassidy. We're so glad to have you with us today. Please tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your current role as an international enrollment counselor.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Valeria, and welcome everybody. So excited to have the opportunity to be with you today. As Valeria introduced me, my name is Cassidy, and I'm an international enrollment counselor, specifically for students in Central and Southern Africa and Ghana here at the University of Arizona. And I am extremely passionate about working with international students and helping them get where they need to go.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. Hi, Joe. Glad to have you here. Will you please also introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit more about the many hats that you wear as an Associate Vice Provost and Senior Assistant Dean in the graduate space?
Sure, Valeria. Thank you so much. I'm very delighted to be here. And even though my title, as you can see behind me, is quite long, a good bit of the work that I do is around international recruitment for UMBC. We have a large group of international students. We have a lot of STEM-related programs, and so students are very attracted to us. And about 10 years ago, I sort of raised my hand and said, hey, I'm happy to start doing some international recruitment. And I've had the opportunity to travel and meet people from all over the world and talk about higher education and getting degrees from the US and how impactful that can be in people's lives. And I've actually worked with some students now that have moved on to their careers and they still stay in touch with me. So it's been a delight to kind of fall into this field, and looking forward to talking more with you all today. Thanks.
Of course, thank you. And well, Tina, we would love to know more about your role as the Director of International Admissions and what your everyday looks like.
Definitely. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. And as a Director of International Admission here at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, I oversee the undergraduate admission. My day-to-day is more like reviewing applications, give admission decisions, and also help students, guide them through admission process, enrollment process, and also travel around the world to meet with our prospective students.
Well, it's so cool. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
As a reminder to our audience, please stay tuned for the Q&A session at the end and place any questions that you have in the chat. Our moderators or our TOEFL team overseeing the chat will answer them shortly. With that being said, let's get started. So part one of this live session is about general admissions. With that being said, when students are applying to schools, they might see terms like rolling admission, early action, early decision, and regular admission, but may not be sure what they mean. Tina, can you please tell us a little bit more about each type of admissions process?
Definitely, each school have different types of admission, and rolling admission is more like they don't really have a hard deadline. Whenever you submit your application, then the school is gonna give you the decision. And but also a lot of schools have early action, early decision. And like us at UMass Dartmouth, our early action, early decision was just closed on November 15th. And all those early action, early decision students already get their admission decision now. So they have enough time to choose their schools for the ones applying for fall. And also regular admission is just, like a regular admission. You come applying for fall and the decision deadline is normally around could be June or May or March, depends on each school. It's just a few months before the semester starts.
Okay, so as a follow-up question to that, have you found that one type of admission or decision is more popular with international students?
Definitely, we do see more and more international students applying for early action, early decision. Those students probably they already got like a very good guidance from their counselor, from some other partner they work with, and they know they need to apply early. So that way they can have enough time to choose their dream school and get multiple offers from the school they apply, and then to have enough time schedule their visa interview.
No, that's a really good point, Tina. Thank you for bringing that up. And I just want to point out that when you're applying early decision for an international student, keep in mind that you're signing a binding contract with the school. So applying early decision is telling that school, hey, you're my number one. I really want to be here. And if I am accepted, I will be there. And so that's amazing if you have the funds and you know that you 100% want to attend that school no matter what. But if you're an international student, most of us will depend on some form of financial aid. And if you're depending on that, I would highly suggest for you to consider regular admission or really talk to your guidance counselors, maybe some admissions counselor at the school, and trying to figure out that that is the best decision for you, because you don't want to be the person breaking that contract. So moving forward from that, the Common Application has gained popularity in recent years, especially with international students. Cassidy, can you tell us a little bit more about the Common App and how it can be beneficial for international students?
Definitely. I personally did not know about the Common App when I was doing my undergrad research and things like that. And now that I know about it, I think that it's one of the most useful tools for a student looking to apply to multiple universities. So basically it's for undergraduate students wanting to apply to, like I said, multiple universities. They have over 1,000 different member colleges, so you can utilize that space to just submit one application, and that will go to all, maybe you pick 10 universities. You only have to submit one application for it. And that helps also with not having to pay, 10 application fees, submitting the same documents multiple times and having all different spaces. It gets confusing. We understand that. And that's what the Common App is really helpful with.
Absolutely. I mean, just what you said about having one application for so many universities is so useful, especially if you're a little bit like me and you go a little bit insane and apply to 15 schools. Did I overdo it? Probably. But the Common Application was very useful when applying to 15 institutions.
I wouldn't call it insane. I would call it perseverance.
Reframing. I like that. Well, Jill, the last question in this section is for you. How does the application process for graduate students differ from the undergraduate process?
Yeah, Valeria, thank you for asking that question, because it really is quite different. And for those of you who are thinking about applying to grad school, there is not a rolling admission type of process in grad school. Typically, when you apply to grad school, You're applying to the university, of course, but you're also applying to a specific program. So let's say, for example, you might be applying for computer science. So the deadline for computer science at UMBC, for example, is different than a deadline from, say, the biology program or maybe our public policy program. So as an applicant for graduate school, what you need to be aware of is that there are different deadlines for different programs, different deadlines, whether or not you're applying for a PhD or a master's level program. But there's not a early action or anything like that. So the most important thing to know when applying is to keep an eye on that deadline and make sure you apply before that deadline actually gets there. Because if you apply the day of the deadline, you're kind of at the bottom of the electronic pile, so to speak. There's not a common app per se at the graduate level. There are some programs that participate in a group application process. So if you apply to one school, it might also be considered by multiple schools. But most graduate schools, and particularly some of the larger graduate schools, have an application process only their own, which means that, you need to keep in mind how many schools you're going to apply to, keeping track of the deadlines, keeping track of all the different materials that you need to submit for each of those schools. It's probably a little bit more complex at the undergrad level, but you're also at the graduate level at this point. And so there may be higher expectations from the faculty in terms of your application. So different deadlines for different programs, not really a common app. And so you'll need to do your research on the schools and the programs and narrow it down, I would say, to no more than 5 or 6 academic programs to apply to.
That is very useful advice. Thank you, Jill. And, I'm so glad that we have the perspective of both undergraduate and graduate processes that will be super helpful for our audience. So moving on from admissions, let's talk about applying to college. And while deciding which schools to apply to is a very long and tedious process, filling out applications and keeping track of requirements and deadlines can be difficult. And when I was applying to schools in the US, I made a spreadsheet of all the schools that I wanted to apply to, important stats that I wanted to keep in mind, like due dates, that one's big, acceptance rates, so all sorts of information that I found it helpful to keep track of. And well, Cassidy, this first question is for you. Do you have any tips to help make the application process easier? And are there any resources that can help students during the process?
Definitely. There are a lot of different resources out there for you. I do want to specifically say, reach out to your enrollment counselor, your admissions person, if you are confused about what to do or if you're missing something. Utilize the website that the university has, because most likely your questions will be answered by that website. There's a lot of times an FAQ page, so that, frequently asked questions by other students that might answer your questions as well. Also, you should definitely prepare your application documents at least a month before your deadline in case you need to submit anything else. Otherwise, then you might have to push your application to a future term. So being proactive rather than reactive will definitely set you up for success and help minimize the stress a little bit at least. Also, showing respect and professionalism when you are talking to an advisor or an enrollment counselor is definitely vital. I love it when I get to talk and advise my students. It can be hard sometimes, if they're really frustrated and they have only ever had bad experiences. I try to approach it with a little bit more of a positive point of view, and I'm here to help all of my students through those processes. And then in general, you should remember to write your emails in the body of the email, not in the subject line, okay? Because I can only read the first few words in the subject line, and so I don't know exactly what you're saying. So remember that. And also, we can't reply instantaneously. So please just give us some patience, because we work with thousands of students And we want to make sure that you all feel equally supported. So that patience is very appreciated. Lastly, I will definitely say Education USA is a fantastic tool for international students who aren't even sure where to start navigating the process of coming to study in the United States. And especially because they're located all over the world, they're there to help students get to the United States and understand all of the processes and help make sense of it.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. I'm glad that you mentioned reaching out to your admissions counselor because absolutely they're there to help. They're happy to help most of the time. And like you said, it is important to keep that professional etiquette. So think about how you email your high school teachers, like there's an email format that you follow. Usually you won't use emojis, all that stuff that you have to keep in mind because it is a professional interaction. So thank you for bringing that up. And also, I just want to point out that Studying the USA also has an amazing blog where a bunch of students all over the US write their experience in the US, how they got there, any tips like when you actually get there, how to get there. So all sorts of topics. That's another really, really helpful resource. Anyway, so Tina, the next question is for you. What is some feedback that you've heard from students about applying to schools in the US?
So definitely, Cassidy actually already threw out a lot of resource there. And then I definitely want to emphasize the website will be your best friend. And because each school you are applying have different admission requirement, have different deadlines, have different TOEFL IELTS requirement. And then you definitely want to go check their website. And then don't think, even though I apply through Common App, I'm just submitting one application to 10 different schools. But also, since you want to apply to those 10 different schools, why not just go check out their website and really read their admission requirements and see if you submit all the documents they required. And also, Valeria, I really like you made a spreadsheet and kind of like comparing the tuition, scholarship amount, location, and also a job opportunity. And also, what are the advantage going to that school? What's a disadvantage of going to that school? And then list all those out and compare. So don't just go to a school because, they offer me the highest amount of scholarship. You also need to look at the job opportunity, look at the location, whether you will be able to get a job after you graduate. And also look at the academic resource. Are you going to be able to get enough support on campus? Will you be successful during study here? And study here in the US is expensive. You definitely want to get your money worth, not just think I'm going to a school which is like a very cheap tuition, or I'm going to a school offer me the high scholarship. That's just the one reason to consider. Also think about other reasons as well. That's
Absolutely. You're making very important points, Tina. As a follow-up question to that question, Jill, what is some feedback that you've heard from graduate students about applying to schools in the US?
Well, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge that Cassidy and Tina did a great job with their comments, because I just kept wanting to nod, because yes, everything they said really applies to applying to grad school as well. I think grad students are surprised by the fact that faculty at the graduate level typically make the initial recommendation for admission to grad school. So whereas at the undergrad level, there are admissions counselors and there's staff at the undergrad admissions office that will review your information and your documents, and based upon certain criteria will make an admission decision. At the graduate level, it's the faculty members. And so it's very important that you put together a very professional application. And I think graduate students are surprised when they realize that, someone actually did read my personal statement. And it wasn't just that fact that I got A's and B's in college, but the faculty looked at the classes I took. So it's, whether or not you took the appropriate classes to be prepared for that higher level graduate program, those are all going to be factors that are included in. And so someone might have a 3.8 on an American scale, a 4.0 scale GPA. But if the courses they took are not relevant at all to that graduate program, they might not be admitted. And so I think it's, it's much more narrow. It's looking at the courses you took, how well you did. It's looking at your personal statement and how you relate what you want to study at the master's or the PhD level to your passion, your career goals, etc. And it's also about how you interact with faculty, whether or not you're communicating with them about your application via email, which is probably the preferred method. You need to be professional. You need to be respectful. There can be strong applicants that might be demanding of a faculty member about wanting a decision by a certain date, and they might not get admitted because they were, not a team player. So those are all new factors, different necessarily than at the undergrad level. But again, you're at this level of your life now where you're moving into your professional life. And so it's really how you present yourself.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything students can do to make themselves stand out in the application process? And Jill, do you actually want to start us off with the graduate perspective?
Yeah, so it just kind of reflects on what I was saying in terms of your professionalism. I cannot emphasize enough, and I feel like I'm not sure people hear me when I say it, but that personal statement is your opportunity. That is your chance to explain, why you want to be in this particular field or why the master's degree is something that you've always wanted to pursue, and how you've built your academic career, your internships, your research, whatever, to be prepared for the next level of study. So taking the time when you're writing your personal statement, for example, having other people review it, and having people review it who understand the importance of a personal statement. So it might not be your aunt, and it might not be your grandparents, but you want someone else who is a professional in the field or a faculty member who can comment on the content. So I think if there was one thing, it's very, very hard to say there's one really important do, but at the graduate level, if I had to pick one, it would be to write a very compelling personal statement. And that's going to relate a little bit to don't, Valeria, if I may. So don't use AI to write your personal statement. And I know people are starting to get tempted with it. You might use it to help you be more succinct or more concise. But AI is not you, and it cannot replicate the story that you have to tell. So do take the time, write a very strong personal statement. Don't have it created by AI.
Thank you, Jill. Cassidy, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. That is a really fair point. I don't even think about that sometimes when I'm receiving applications and stuff, but thank you for pointing that out. From the undergraduate perspective. And also, I think some of this applies for graduate students as well. Making a point of trying to do your best in your classes to have a good GPA, that is a big deal. We're not just looking at who you are as a person. We want to see that you are going to be able to succeed in a competitive environment like a university. Also, having great extracurricular experience, showing us that you are active in your community, you are currently working towards being in the space that you want to have a career in, or whatever that might be. Showing that you have teamwork skills and things like that is also very important. My biggest one, of course, is also that personal statement, but also if you decide to have a recommendation letter sent, then you definitely need to make sure that it's somebody who knows you well enough to be able to talk specifics about you, not just something that's vague. So definitely try to create that relationship with your high school counselor, your community leader, if you're, participating in church activities or whatever that might be. So that way, when we are reading this letter, we can get a better picture of who you really are from somebody who has seen the great things that you're doing and they just want to talk about it.
Absolutely. Tina, what about you?
I do want to mention because SAT is still optional for a lot of school coming out from pandemic, and even though we are still optional, but still, if you do have good SAT score, definitely choose to submit your SAT. That can make your application stand out and maybe qualifies you for honors college.
Hmm.
Fair
Yeah,
point.
thank you for pointing that out. For the next question, Jill, do you have any do's and don'ts for the application process?
Yeah, so remember my note was don't use AI. And I think Cassie was also mentioning it as well. Don't ask a faculty member or supervisor or whoever for a recommendation and it's due tomorrow or due in 2 days. It puts them in a very complicated situation. You might have a great recommender, but they might not be able to get it done in your timeline. So building your relationships with your recommendation writers, including especially faculty, asking them far in advance for a recommendation letter that is very specific to that particular student and not just this person took my class and they got an A and they participated and that is it. We see way too many of those letters and they're not really informative for the person, they don't add to the application process itself. So ask with plenty of time, make sure you've built a relationship, follow up in a very pleasant way and not a demanding way. And I would say that's, one of the things that you can do to really enhance the quality of your application. Unfortunately, we talk about all these different pieces and they're all important, right? But we find that students typically will maybe take one piece of their application and not to take it as serious. And so they're all really important parts of the application and the decision to whether or not you get admitted to that school.
I'm glad you bring that up, Jill. Well, Tina and Cassidy, do you have any undergraduate perspective to add to that answer?
Just something.
Go ahead, Tina.
Oh, just something I might recommend you to do is if you don't receive an admission decision, definitely go on their application, go to their website and see if you are missing any documents or check your email, check your email again. Okay. So make sure because we always communicate through email and then let you know whether which document is missing and then reach out to your counselor, admission counselor and then see, I already submit my application for 1 or 2 months. I still don't receive a decision. Am I missing any document? And for don't, I know you're going to college and you're going to make a lot of decisions on your own. And also you really need to do the research. And then don't just send an email asking, what's your tuition? Don't ask me just send out email, say, how do I apply? 100% of the time, those answers are already on their website. You really need to do, rather than waiting for the answer, the email back for 1-2 weeks, and then you can just do your research and find that answer right away on the website.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. I agree with Tina about all of those. Thank you for adding that. The only other thing that I really push students on is being proactive, not reactive. Being an international student, which I have personally done a couple of times, it's a long process, right? We're talking about getting admitted, choosing what school you want to go to, getting all your funding documents, going through the visa process, buying your plane ticket in advance so it's not $10 gajillion, right? It takes a long time. And so, giving yourself a year to go through that whole process really sets yourself up for success because a lot of times in most countries in the world, the visa appointment wait time, it can be months ahead. So you don't want to, apply a month before the semester starts right at the end of right before the deadline and expect that you're going to be able to get through all those processes. So definitely be proactive, not reactive.
I'm so glad that you both bring up those points. And also to go back to asking questions that are so blatantly in the website, think about this is the first impression that you're giving the admissions counselor. So maybe in a bigger school, maybe they won't remember your name, but especially if you're applying to like smaller schools, it's not a lot of people like doing the admissions work, you know, so they'll see your name pop up and they'll recognize it, chances are. And so you wanna, whenever you email the school, sometimes people can even call. That's another option, by the way. If your school offers like an international line, you can call the admissions office and ask them your question. But you want to make sure that you're giving a great first impression, especially because you're abroad. You can't be on campus and present yourself in person. So keep that in mind. But we're wrapping up now for the section on tips for applying, and we're moving on to the topic that everybody wants to know about, and that is financial aid and scholarships. So financial aid and scholarships is a big consideration for international students. Studying and living in another country can be very expensive, and many students depend on some type of financial aid. So let's dive a little bit deeper on that. So first of all, let's talk about the different types of financial assistance. Tina, what's the difference between loans, need-based financial aid, and gift aid, like scholarships and grants?
Yeah, there are different types of financial assistance. So let's talk about loans. And for international students, normally you won't be able to get a loan from the US because most of the loan company in the US require a co-signer. And then the co-signer has to be a US citizen. And it's a huge liability for them to co-sign somebody else's loan. So most of the time, they're probably not going to do it. And also, it's really hard to find a co-signer here. And your best bet will be get a loan from your local bank in your home country. And we do see plenty of students getting the loan from their home country. That's doable. And for financial aid, there's need-based scholarship, and also merit-based scholarship. So for need-based scholarship, not a lot of schools offer it, to be honest. And you definitely want to check with the school you're applying to. Do they offer need-based scholarship? And also for need-based scholarship, some schools are even need-blind based. So they just gave out a random scholarship to random students. And it really depends. But for merit scholarship, it's really based on your academics. So you definitely want to make sure you get good grades for your high school, and also make sure you have a good application with good SAT score if you choose to submit your SAT. And for gift aid or like a grant is normally only for US students. It doesn't really qualify for international students. So your best bet would be merit scholarship. And other than that, there might be some scholarship out on the website, on Google, or like you can Google it. But remember, if you are applying for scholarship outside the school you're applying to, make sure you don't pay any additional money for the scholarship you are applying to. If you have to pay for a scholarship, and then that's a scam. Yeah, just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. I know one too many people who have been scammed like that, so watch out, you guys. Okay, so the next question is for Cassidy. And what forms do international students need to complete in order to qualify to apply to financial aid?
That's a great question, and I get this question probably about 50 times a day. So of course it can depend on the university. For example, the University of Arizona has a merit-based partial scholarship that undergraduate international students are considered for if they just submit a complete application with us. There are additional scholarships if a student is admitted into our institution that they can gain access to apply to from their departments and things like that, all in one database. So that they have to do additional research, read through all the different scholarship options, because there are thousands, and try to find ones that work for them, that are up their alley, and read the requirements for those scholarships. Also, I get this question a lot: can international students sign up for the FAFSA? The FAFSA is only for US citizens and permanent residents in the United States. So that is not a tool that you can use. But I do know, while our university does not use like the CSS profile to help with financial aid and things like that, there are some institutions that do use that tool. So just doing your research and making sure that you are reaching out to the right people to ask, what website should I be looking at? What's the difference between a scholarship and a loan, right? And things like that. Having that conversation is important. And as my mom always says, apply for the free money first before you sign up for a loan. So there's lots of resources. It can be really confusing. As I said, utilize the admissions contacts, the scholarship and financial aid office if you're admitted to a university. And even Education USA has lots of information about like scholarship opportunities and funding opportunities in your specific country. I know that a lot of countries do offer like government scholarships and things like that, and there's processes for that. So do your research, and there's a lot of opportunities out there for funding. You just have to work for it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I will reiterate, do your research, you guys, because you don't know when you'll find a scholarship or a fellowship or whatever it is that can really fund your studies abroad, sometimes full ride, sometimes partially, but still substantial money. So the last question about financial aid is for Jill. Is there anything you'd like to add about financial aid and scholarships to graduate students?
Yes, thanks for asking. So it's very different at the graduate level. Most schools, I don't really know of any graduate schools that have like a merit-based or need-based scholarship for incoming international graduate students. There are other types of funding opportunities. Usually they come through the form of a teaching assistantship, a graduate assistantship. If you're applying to a PhD program, usually there's grant funding or something to support the research that you're doing. But that's not for every graduate student, and particularly for students entering a master's level program. There might not be a particularly anything available to you in your first year or your first semester at the graduate school. There are jobs on campus, and we have a lot of graduate students who do all kinds of things on campus. I've had graduate students serve as lifeguards at the swimming pool, or work the concession stand at the home men's basketball games, but there's not necessarily a scholarship per se. However, I do know a lot of graduate students, once they get to campus and once they've started building relationships, they find opportunities through paid internships, through their CPT, their curricular practical training experience. They do find assistantships maybe that funds them in their second year of their master's degree, but it's not a common thing to have one as soon as you apply and get to campus. So I would say the distinction, though, is PhD programs do usually have some funding. Master's level, not as much.
Thank you, Jill. Before we move on to the next part of the session, I do want to share a little personal anecdote on how I financed going to college in the US. So I got a partial scholarship through Lycoming College, but then once I actually got to the US, I got campus jobs like Jill was suggesting. You're not going to be able to get the campus jobs immediately when you get there, but I personally was able to get a job secured like the first few weeks of college. And that was basically by just like me asking, my international advisor, my professional advisors, academic advisors, hey, like, is there anything around campus, I can do to earn a few extra bucks, Something that a lot of people don't really consider about studying abroad is the expenses that you have when you actually get there. So there's tuition, there's books, all that kinds of stuff, but you also need to live there, right? So like, you're gonna live there. You're gonna want to go for coffee with friends. You're gonna want to buy deodorant or like any essentials, and so that money adds up. And campus jobs can really help you finance that. Depending on the job, depending on the rate that the campus job pays, you'll be able to allocate some of that money to tuition or books or just personal savings. But start off with campus jobs, ask people, don't be afraid to literally say, I want a job. Where can I apply, or can you give me one? Because that's how I got probably like my first couple of positions on campus. Um, After your first year, you'll be able to apply to CPT. I can't remember who mentioned CPT, but an internship program, usually they're paid. That's another income avenue that you'll have. And you can have as many CPTs as you want. There's rules about that. We have a live session about CPT and OPT actually. So if you want to check that out after it, it'll be very useful. But so yeah, just finding ways to work around. There's also, what's it called? There's a job where you administer like the dorms on campus. I can't
An
remember
RA,
the name for the
resident
life.
assistant.
An RA, thank you. I completely blanked, but an RA job is a very sweet deal because usually you'll get room and board, or maybe room or board completely covered for you. So that's anywhere between like $3,000 to $6,000 a semester or per academic year that you don't have to pay anymore because you have this position. And on top of that, you can get a stipend or an hourly rate. It really depends on the school that you go to. That's a really sweet deal for international students because you get a lot of money and there's an expense that you have to pay to be there. They don't have to worry about anymore. So definitely look that up, you guys. So that was a long spiel. Anyway, so we're moving on to the role of TOEFL in admissions. Although application requirements differ for each school, you will most likely need to prove your English skills. And you can do this by taking the English proficiency test. If you're planning on studying in the US, you should really consider taking the TOEFL IBT. It's accepted by 100% of the universities in the US and preferred actually 9 out of 10 times. So the next question is for you, the viewers. How many of you have taken the TOEFL test or are considering taking it in the future? Drop a taken if you've completed it and a considering if you're planning to. Feel free to share any tips or experiences in the comments. And as a tip to taking the TOEFL, I will say, if you watch movies in English or listen to music in English, you will expedite learning the language or just familiarizing yourself to like everyday, English usage so much faster. This is something that I used for years, and I feel very prepared when I was like taking the TOEFL. So definitely consider consuming English media. So as you type your questions in the comment section, the answers in the comment section, I want to remind you there will be a Q&A at the end of the session. So add your questions if you have any in the chat, and we'll be answering them shortly. All right, so the next questions are for all of our lovely panelists today. Why do you think that the TOEFL test is so widely accepted and respected, especially in the US?
I actually asked my colleagues about this morning just so I could get, some perspective on, because we all have different regions, right? You can see I work specifically more with African students, but I wanted to kind of gauge, what students think when they're anywhere in the world. And the biggest thing that they said is it's one of the most well-known and standardized tests. It was created in the US. Like you said, 100% of US institutions accept the TOEFL and they prefer it. It's provided by ETS, which is a huge education testing agency. They, do the test for GRE, GMAT, things like that at the graduate level. So they're very well trusted and standardized just across the board. And then another thing is we know that there's a lot of different options to taking the test and proving your English proficiency. It gives us a very realistic picture of your abilities in the English language because there's 4 categories that they go through, right? Like speaking and grammar and everything. It's not just focused on one single aspect, because we all know, if we've ever tried to learn another language, your brain has multiple parts that it has to connect together to fully understand that. So we just want to make sure that you would be set up for success, especially in a competitive environment like a university.
Yeah, and I would add to that with what Cassie said, which is all absolutely accurate and really sort of the reason why 100% of the universities in the US accept TOEFL. Long-standing tradition of accurate and well thought out testing to determine someone's English proficiency, and not just in general English proficiency. It's really designed to test English proficiency and in an academic institution, in an academic setting. So that's one way that it stands out from some of the other tests. But my faculty members, and again, remember at the graduate level, faculty members are the ones who do all the initial reviews of applications and make recommendations for admission. They use the word TOEFL as English proficiency test. I mean, they don't distinguish between, it's almost like in the US, we have copier machines, but we always used to call them Xeroxes. Are you going to Xerox this? And basically, Xerox is the company brand of the copier machine, and TOEFL is the brand of the English proficiency test, but we use TOEFL interchanged with English proficiency, which suggests it's, again, it's been around a long time. Its validity is without question, and it's accepted everywhere. So it's really, if we don't say to a student, you can only take the TOEFL, but we certainly highly recommend that they take the TOEFL.
I just want to add that, it's kind of a worldwide well-known, if you are applying to US school, definitely take TOEFL. And then some students who might they are still deciding whether I'm going to go to US or UK or Australia, some other country, then they might think about take IELTS or some other exam. But if you plan to go to US, TOEFL is your go-to. And also, among so many different type of English proficiency test, and then our faculty, our admission, we never doubt TOEFL scores. But there's also other types of English tests coming up, Duolingo or some other types, and then some schools might not accept those. So if you take TOEFL, you have a wider option when you choose schools. So definitely take TOEFL.
And I just wanted to also add a little caveat, because I know that, at least as somebody who's front facing when, helping students apply to universities and things like that, do your research and see if you actually need to provide proof of English proficiency or not. For example, a lot of countries in Africa, the mode of instruction is in English. So most of my students don't actually need to provide it, even though English is not necessarily their first language. So definitely do your research, take a look at that and see if you need to go through the process of taking the TOEFL, or if you've already covered that with something else in your education.
Sorry, just add on to that, and you might also want your school to provide a letter saying the media of instruction is in English to place the TOEFL exam.
Absolutely. Thank you for the last piece of information, Tina. I was about to say that definitely if you apply for, or if you qualify for a waiver, take advantage of it. But you want to make sure that the school knows that you're exempted from that requirement, because otherwise they'll just mark your application as incomplete. But as a follow-up question to that, do you all think that taking the TOEFL test gives students an advantage both during the application process and once on campus? Who wants to start off?
I can start, I guess. I do think it does. I've actually taken the TOEFL exam myself. I did not pass it very well. So I do see, that students, if they're prepared to take a test like that, then they're prepared to be in that academic space, because it is a lot of pressure when you come to university, you know what I mean? And then also, I think because TOEFL is testing so many different aspects of your English, it gives you perspective. Like, oh, maybe I do need to work a little bit more on my grammar, and things like that. And you're aware of that, so that way when you're going into your classes, you can say, I need to focus a little bit more on this, and that's perfectly okay.
And also, I think by taking TOEFL, because it really have those sectional score, where your strength is, where your weak is, is. And then like when you get on campus, each school, I would say each school have some sort of academic support to help you. Like at UMass Dartmouth, we have the tutoring center offering free tutoring. If you feel like you need to work on your speaking, and then maybe you can schedule a tutoring session who can work with you on your English speaking. And also if you feel like you need to more help get on a writing section, and then you can go to the tutoring center, get help. So definitely would give you those advantage.
Yeah, and I think I would add that if you've taken the TOEFL and you did well enough to meet the standards required, there's also a level of confidence you have in your English proficiency. And I don't know if that would be the case with other tests, but a student taking the TOEFL would have, I think it's more of an internal confidence that they are, they're capable and that they're ready to land on a US campus and start interacting with their peers. I can't say for sure when I walk across campus, I interact with international students. Oh, you took the TOEFL, but oh, you didn't, because we're not going to know that. But I think it's more of an internal confidence and help someone feel more secure that their English is, going to be good enough to get along with, outside of the classroom discussions or walking down, the hallways. And I think that's just a good thing.
Absolutely. Second language anxiety is real, you guys. And of course, it's something that, you can feel like your accent is not very good, for example, or that you make a lot of grammar mistakes. But if you pass the TOEFL, that means you are qualified to study in an American university. So take that as reassurance, like Jill says. So as a recap, or the final question of our live session today, I know we're so sad that it's already ended, but Tina, Cassidy, and Jill, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us such valuable insights. Before we move on to the audience Q&A, do you have any final pieces of advice for the application process, or anything that you want to highlight about your institution or program?
I do want to follow up on the TOEFL thing, because we have gotten the question, if I took the TOEFL as an undergrad applicant to a US school, do I have to retake it? And it kind of depends, but we would recommend that you do retake it at the graduate level, because your TOEFL score is only good for 2 years in terms of its validity. So I think if you're applying to grad school and you're wanting to know whether or not you should retake it, I would recommend you retake it. Advice, don't use AI to write your personal statement.
That's a big one.
I think my biggest advice is don't be shy. I can't necessarily speak for my colleagues here in the chat, but I'm pretty sure that we've all been to another country before. I myself, like I said, I've studied in multiple different countries, and I know how nerve-wracking it can be. I know the processes involved and how scary it is, especially when you're going to fly across the world. So don't be shy. Let's talk about it. We're here specifically to help you through this, and we do understand more than you may think.
My advice would be prepare and apply as early as possible. Don't think, you're gonna come for fall and then you're gonna start your application in May. That's too late. You're not gonna get in, because international students, it's kind of unfair. You have to go through the visa process, such a long process, and waiting for the admission decision. That's really the reason why you need to apply early. And like US students, they already get educated when they are in their sophomore year. And for college admission, that's the time they start to prepare. And you really need to prepare at least 1 year ahead, or just at least 1 semester ahead of time. And then if you're really thinking about going to the US, and just to make sure you apply early. Last piece I want to throw out there, at UMass Dartmouth, we offer 10,000 to 15,500 merit scholarship, and we're just 1 hour south of Boston. So make sure you take advantage of a scholarship opportunity.
All right, well, thank you all for all of your very helpful answers today. Now we're moving on to the Q&A section. So for those of you watching right now, this is your time to shine. If you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll be answering them. The first question is from Oliver. My question is to know if it is possible to study in the USA if we have done our previous studies in French. Does anyone want to take this one?
Oliver, it doesn't really matter what your previous studies are in. French is not only is it a lovely language, but it may be a second language for you, but you'll definitely need to bring a TOEFL or related score with you, because French is, obviously not an English-based language, so you would have to do that.
And also the transcripts. I know for most universities, including the University of Arizona, we want to see the original transcripts in French, and we also want certified translations into English so that we can make a decision.
All right, moving on to the next question. This one is for Cassidy, asked by the viewer Agrippa. English is a medium of communication at all levels of education in Zambia. Now, do I need to provide a TOEFL score when applying for study in the US universities?
No, you do not. You studied in English, you speak English, don't worry about it. That's not a requirement for you.
All right. The next question is, I took the TOEFL test when I applied to an undergraduate program in the US. Do I need to take the test again for graduate school? And how long are scores valid?
Yeah, so you probably asked that question before I answered it a few minutes ago. It's a 2-year validity, so it's very likely you will need to take that test again.
Right. The following question is, can you tell us a little bit more about what an I-20 form is when applying for financial aid?
So I'd like to point out I-20 is actually not used to apply for financial aid. I-20 is for you to schedule a visa interview and for you to get your F1 student visa to come study in the US. And all international student who's gonna study on F1 or J1, they all need an I-20. And because that process takes quite long, especially when you schedule the visa interview. And that's why you really need to apply early and finish the application process, get the admission decision, and then watch out for your emails, finish the enrollment process, because I believe each school requires some financial documents like a bank statement or even enrollment deposit for you to get the I-20. So you really need to make sure you finish that enrollment process in order for you to get your I-20 and then schedule a visa interview. For financial aid, that's we've covered previously, you can apply for the merit scholarship or other sort of financial aid. It doesn't have anything to do with your I-20, but bank statement, that's what your family or your sponsor provide.
And I just want to offer a little bit more context about the I-20. The I-20 form, it'll be a sheet of paper, so regular paper, like not special or anything. But what that will do is that is a super important document to get back in the country when you go home to visit for the holidays or for an internship, whatever it is. This will be delivered to the TSA, immigration person, along with your passport, along with your F1 visa. Without that I-20 form, you're probably not going to be able to come back to the US. And what lets the immigration person know is where you're studying, how much you're paying, what your major is, if you have any internships going on, if you're participating in CPT or OPT, it will let them know in that form. And one more piece of information, I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed by this because it's like a whole other topic, but usually you want your international advisor to sign your I-20 before you leave the US. So if you're going home for the holidays, you want to visit your advisor and have them sign it, and then have them sign it again when you come back to the US. So it's just a piece, in essence, it's a document that helps the government monitor your activity in the US under an F1 visa, essentially. So that was a long spiel. Anyway, the next question is for me, actually. So you mentioned creating a spreadsheet to help you during the application process. Do you have any other tips? Absolutely. And this tip, I wish I would have known when I was an undergrad, because okay, so you at 18, 17, whenever it is that you're applying for undergrad, you will never know where you want to end up in life. Maybe you have an idea what you want to study, but all of that can change, or it won't. But 18, you have an idea what you want for your life. You're not fully sure yet. You will never find a perfect school. That just doesn't exist. But what you can find is a school that's just right for you. I know that sounds very corny, but hear me out here. I wish I would have done a list of things that I really valued in having in an institution, or like of my study abroad experience, before actually applying to the schools that I did, because location is very important. You might not think that, especially if you have never been to the States, you might not know the difference between like being in California or like New York. But you want to do your research and like really prioritize like a location, for example, like a list of majors that the schools offer. Liberal art colleges are wonderful, right? But they usually have less majors that you can choose from, versus a big university that you have, the world is your oyster. You have so many options for you. So essentially make a list of the things that you want to take out from your study abroad experience. And yeah, just keep that in mind whenever you're researching for universities, because there's so many schools out there that are so different, and very easily you can get overwhelmed by all the options. But if you're intentional in your research and you know what you're looking for, or have an idea of the kind of experience that you want to go for, that can be very helpful. And I just want to draw an example here. For example, I wanted to be in New York City. That's what I thought, at least when I was applying to undergrad. But for example, applying to Barnard College is very different than applying to NYU. Barnard College is a very small liberal art college. NYU is a big university, no official campus. So, same location, but just like way different experience. So having a list can really just alleviate some of that stress for you. And yeah, that's my tip for you. We have now reached the end of our Q&A session. So thank you all so much for your thoughtful questions and for tuning into today's session. Cassidy, Jill, Tina, it was a pleasure having you here. And thank you to our TOEFL team for making the session possible. Stay tuned for the winner of the Study USA $50 Visa gift card in the comments, and be sure to follow TOEFL and Studying USA on social for even more resources on your journey towards studying in the US. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our moderators.
Thank you. Good luck on your applications, guys.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Good luck.